Effective introductory paragraphs. What do you think is the most important sentence in any essay? The first one. Why is that? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. That first sentence tells the reader what kind of writer they can expect for you to be. What you need to do with that first sentence is to grab the reader's attention. There are 5 strategies that I strongly suggest you use in order to do this. The first is a question. The second is a shocking statement. A historical statement works as well as a quote and a vivid definition. We will go further into detail into each of the categories. First, you can use a question. Why a question? Well, it makes the reader think. It's also appropriate for both expository and literary essays. Here's some examples. You could start an essay on carbon dioxide emissions with, what will happen if carbon dioxide emissions continue at their current levels? You could even start a historical paper on, why did the South secede from the Union? So 2 examples of how you can start with a question. Now it's your turn to practice. On a piece of paper, I'd like you to write a question to start a paper about school uniforms. This can be either for a literary or an expository essay. Please feel free to stop the PowerPoint and pause it if you need extra time to think. Now that you've written your own question, let's move on to the next strategy, which is a shocking statement. This is one of my favorite strategies for gaining a reader's interest. It is extremely effective, and you don't necessarily need to agree with what you write on the shocking statement. Again, this is appropriate for both expository and literary essays. An example of this is all illegal immigrants should be placed in jail. Now, I don't agree with that statement, nor does the author. However, it is extremely shocking and grabs the reader's attention. And then to counteract what you said, you could write the rest of the paper on how that mindset is incorrect. Again, you don't have to agree with what you write. The point is to catch the reader's attention. For example, if I said, all students should do 10 hours of homework every night, most of you would disagree with me, and I would disagree as well. However, I caught your attention. Again, now it's your turn to practice. As teenagers, you do this all the time, so I'm quite certain that you can come up with an effective, shocking statement. I would like you to write one to start an essay about school violence. This can be for either an expository or literary essay. Again, feel free to stop the presentation if you need extra time to think. Now we're moving on to the next strategy, which is a historical statement. Historical statements include phrases such as since the beginning of time, for hundreds of years, for decades, the words always and usually. These can be used for either type of essay, but they're most effective in an expository. Remember, an expository essay is the one that explains, whereas a literary is the one where you're telling a story. An example of using a historical statement for an expository essay is, since the beginning of mankind, we have gazed at the heavens and wondered about the stars above. Well, you can guess from this statement that the paper that would follow would probably be talking about the planets, constellations, etc. Okay, again, the primary thing with a historical statement is the use of the phrases we covered. The beginning of time, for hundreds of years, for decades, for years, always, usually. And this is most effective, again, for expository essay. Now I would like you to practice. You're going to be writing a historical statement to start a paper about education. Again, feel free to stop the presentation so you have more time to think and to write your historical statement. Now on to the 4th strategy, the quote. Quotes are best for expository essays and can be from famous people such as Gandhi. An example is, I object to violence because when it appears to do good, the good is only temporary. The evil it does is permanent. For literary essays, it can also be something a character often says. For example, Mama always says, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Is a quote from Forrest Gump. When you're writing either type of essay, you can use quotes. With a literary essay, it is more effective to quote the characters, whereas in an expository essay, it's better to quote a famous person. Now it's your turn to practice. I want you to write a quote to start an expository essay about peace. You're then going to write a quote to start a literary essay about your family. I strongly suggest you stop the presentation so you will have time to think. Now that you've had a chance to practice quotes, let's move on to the next strategy, which is a vivid description. A vivid description describes a scene or character utilizing many adjectives and adverbs, and can include figurative language, which means similes, metaphors, etc. It gives the reader mental imagery. It creates a picture for the reader. It's most effective for literary essays, but you can also use it in expository writing. This is what you think about when you look at a scary movie and they set the scene for you. You can hear the stairs creaking. You can see the goosebumps on the back of the girl's neck. You can hear the scary music. In movies, they do the same thing with a vivid scene. You are now going to do that with words. An example of this is, the lightning cracked, the thunder boomed, and the wind howled in the distance. You get a picture of your head of a thunderstorm. Now it's your turn to practice. I would like you to write a vivid description to start an expository essay about fear. Again, remember, expository is one that explains. You're also going to write a vivid description to start a scary story, which would be a literary essay. Please feel free to pause the presentation so you have time to write. Alright, now that you've practiced lots of different strategies to grab your reader's attention, what's next? Well, in an introductory paragraph, you also need to include 2 or 3 more sentences about your topic, which will eventually form a bridge to the thesis statement. And the thesis statement is what we're going to cover now. A thesis statement is probably one of the most important components of an expository essay. And it should be the last sentence of your introductory paragraph. It always contains these 3 components: the topic, the claim, and the supporting details. The topic is what you're writing about. So in the thesis statement below, factory farms are unsanitary and cruel, specifically with their treatment of chicken, cattle, and pigs. Factory farms is the topic in the thesis statement. Next is the claim. The claim is what you believe about the topic. It's why you're writing the paper in the first place. So the claim for the author of this thesis statement is that factory farms are unsanitary and cruel. That's what the author believes, and that's then what the rest of the essay is going to be about. The last component of the thesis statement is your supporting points or details. These are the things that back up your claim. They're kind of your proof. And they also become the topics for your body paragraphs. So in this sentence, factory farms are unsanitary and cruel, specifically with their treatment of chicken, cattle, and pigs. You can see that chicken, cattle, and pigs are the supporting points and will be discussed in further detail in body paragraphs. Now it's your turn to practice. I would like you to write a thesis statement using this information. I have provided for you the topic, which is homework, the claim that it should be eliminated, which I am sure you probably agree with, and the supporting points. Busy work, no help to complete at home, and interferes with extracurricular activities. Now take a moment and put those three components into one sentence. Your thesis statement should have come up somewhat similar to this. Don't panic if it's not exactly this way, but it should be somewhat similar. Homework should be eliminated due to no help to complete it at home. It interferes with extracurricular activities, and it is often busy work. Now your assignment. Send an email to your instructor with the attention-grabbing strategies you created during this lesson. You also need to write an original thesis statement for a paper about college. You will choose your claim and supporting points. Send all of those things in an email again to your instructor. Feel free to play the video back as many times as you need in order to ensure that you have understood and can remember the 5 strategies we talked about and the 3 components of a thesis statement.